Um, so 11 months ago at retreat, we made big decisions that would change the actual organizational structure of Resolution Washington. And that was the second time that we made a big organizational change. Years before, we had hired our first executive director. And years before that, we had our first staff person. So we have been through a series of organizational change. And this year, we decided a group of people who would be identified. We had been elected as leadership, and now we were identified as the transition team to envision what would this new organizational structure by including a board of directors and to walk through what does Resolution Washington leadership look like. So today we are probably presenting for the third time. So part of us are like, you guys have seen this, you know what we're talking about. But the little tweaks that we make after every meeting that we have, it gives insight, gives input, and even 15 minutes before 4 o'clock today, we were doing some tweaks. So let us remind you that this is our organizational structure. Your questions would be so appreciated today so that anything can be cleared up. When we show up at retreat, there'll be a moment where we're going to be making a decision about this. And then I really appreciate the insight that we had when we were getting ready is we're asking you to adopt it with the faith of we can change it, we can adjust it, we can make it work better, but let us just put something in place so we know what we're doing. That's how we're showing up today, offering what we've got as the best process. I believe that every single one of you got from Marcia an invitation to today's meeting, and you have the link to not only the fancy, cool, curved lines on our organizational chart because we're so creative, as well as a narrative that defines not only the role or the entity, but a description, a communication, and decision making. So my assumption is you all have access to those two. I'm willing to bet money on the amazing staff that we're working with that magically in the chat, you all are seeing the links. And so I'm really appreciating seeing all your faces, but would it be easier if we share our screen? Some of you might be limited. Do you want us to share the screen or can we just talk from and tell you which document we're in? Anyone prefer shared screen? I see some definite no's and I see no yeses. Trying to read all that wonderful nonverbals that show up on faces. With that, if you would be so kind as to go to the document that's referred proposed 2026-2027 ResWA organizational chart, and Laura is going to walk us through those curvy lines.
Thank you, Maralise. Are we all, since we're not sharing the screen, are we all looking at a document that has a whole bunch of rectangles on it, and on the left side they're blue, and on the right side they're maroon, and then like a teal? Okay, good. Yes, awesome.
Did she just freeze?
So this is the proposed organizational top down. So that's why we have some lines connecting the different groups so you can see where the interactions happen. The dotted or dashed lines are communication, not supervision. Hi, Rick. And the full solid lines would be more of a supervision overseeing role. So you can see on the left side, you have the board of directors, that blue box, and then they supervise. You have development committee, executive committee, and finance committee, which are made up of board members, and then the executive director, and then the staff below that.
You're very
So we'll
first
focus on the left
sentence.
side first, if y'all want to take a look at that. Oh, I'm sorry, did I freeze?
Yep, but now you're back again. So go for it. We
Okay.
heard you.
Okay, so just take a look. We'll focus on the left side, the blue boxes ends with contractors on the bottom. And I think we should start with what questions you have. How is this different from what you imagine? And take it from there.
Hey, Laura, Gayle had a good comment there that I hadn't thought of. Since we're recording, we might want to share the screen for those watching later.
Marcia, can you do that for us? Back to you, Laura.
Oh, wait, this is not the chart I have. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's my chart. Okay, so focus on just the left side, the blue side. Any questions, concerns? Does this look very different? I don't see any raised hands. I don't hear anyone gasping. It's good. We can move over to the right side. So at the top in that maroon or purple rectangle, we have member DRCs, which is all of us. And then down below is the member representatives. And then below that, separately, as you can see, not connected with lines, you have the steering team, which is made up of 2 co-chairs, which we're going to go into more detail about that later, but it will have kind of 2 leadership positions, a work group lead, which would be, we're going to talk about the terminology, but that's basically a work group chair from each work group represented there, the finance liaison, which is a new fancy name, and reports to the board of directors. Not reports to, communicates with. And then down below, we have 5 teal boxes that are standing committees. So marketing and outreach, legislative membership, people of color, and then that new one that we've talked about recently, which is program innovation. Any questions, concerns, comments about the right side of the chart? All right, now for everyone's favorite part, what about questions about the arrows or how these boxes and sides connect with each other? And what does all that mean? Does anyone have any concerns about how these 2 sides of the chart speak to each other, who reports to who, anything like that before we move on to the narrative?
I have a question. Is there a difference between a chair and a work group lead?
That is a great question, Colleen. Yes, we are proposing a terminology change to help with clarity because of the boards of directors, member representatives, chairs, leads. It got a little confusing as we were talking through this. And so we are proposing a change so that the work group chair would now be referred to as a work group lead for clarity, only roles are the same. The difference would be in the steering team would have 2 co-chairs. So those would separate. So steering team has chairs, all work groups have leads. Jobs really aren't any different. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, that doesn't mean that you can't ask any later. But I think we're going to transition into kind of how we got here and talk about some of the narrative and how we have absorbed all of the feedback that we have heard. And I think that's, oh, Rick, and then Maralise, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so thank you, Laura. I just wanted to clarify when we were looking at that steering committee, it looks like it's going to be composed of 8 people. Is that correct? 2 chairs, the 5 work group leads, and then that liaison. So that's why we're looking at it. That whole little committee is going to be, or team is going to be 8 people. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And for those of you watching on this recorded, fascinating presentation, you can email questions that you have. Just dial 1-800, I don't know what. Can you give us the narrative, Marcia? And Ladessa, there's a point I'm going to call on you because we don't have the ED called out in the steering team. So when we get there, kind of a follow-up on Rick's question. Are you able to get the longest titled document in front of us, Marcia? I loved her comment. Who named it that? That's a long name. We're going to start right where we are just so we can walk through. Laura did a fantastic job actually clarifying the vocabulary. So let's just stop there right now. As a transition team, our goal was to right size the Washington membership leadership structures, roles, and responsibility to align with new staff and board of directors. So that's what sort of had us focused. And I'm going to walk through the key questions and the vocabulary. If you can kind of scroll down a little bit, and I believe it's you, Marcia, driving. Yep, thank you. So some of the questions that you need to have in mind. Oh, we'll go back to the questions back there. Stop. Perfect. Sorry, I can't do it with my fingers. Questions to ask yourself as you're listening to us, or is if you're remembering that visual that we just looked at. Have we identified the correct roles? Chair or co-chair of the steering group, what's the level of responsibility? How many different work groups can membership sustain? What is the work, communication, and decision-making flow? We have attempted to answer some of those, but I think this is part of testing the thinking and really going deep to understand it. We did do a couple consensus on vocabulary changes, which is what Colleen and Laura just explored. So at the board level, there's committees. At the membership level, we have work groups. We do some initials. BOD is a board of directors, and ED is the executive director. That doesn't mean anything else. If you know ED is something else, you don't bring it into this room. And then work groups, leads, and steering team chairs. So that's our agreement. If you can now scroll down to our suggested changes, perfect. This table, again, it's going to look so familiar. You're going to say, yeah, I read it. I looked at it. But not quite sure how to do this without reading it out to you. But if you think about it, we're looking at the board of directors. We're giving a brief description. There can be links to the official documents. There's the communication flow. Where's the communication? And what is the decision-making authority? So I certainly do not want to be known as the person who reads slides to a group of intelligent people, but can we just take about 30 seconds and see if you have any question about either the board of directors or the board committees?
Maralise, I'm holding because I want to understand the full concept before I say anything.
Okay.
There is, just know that there is a part in me right now that is like I'm still short-circuiting on something, but I'm holding for to understand the full picture first.
Okay. And I'm also going to be watching the clock to make sure we don't spend too much time in silence and reading, but we move on because I haven't seen a lot of questions. So thank you for that heads up. I bet there's another block of colors, Marcia, after board of directors. Can you give me, so we have staff is a wonderful periwinkle blue. And you'll see this is a work in progress. The links are all highlighted in yellow. Some are under description, they're being defined and all of that. But this is giving you all a feel. What we're all crystal clear, because from nonprofits, we have the reality of a board does not tell staff what to do. A board tells the executive director what to do. And to a certain degree, the executive director tells the staff what to do, not member reps. So I think it's that clarity that we're looking for here. And we go down to contractors, and you'll notice if you remember that blue, that really cool blue thing that we had in the picture, contractors work closely with staff, but it is the executive director or the executive director identifies, but there's a contract that lays out the scope and guides that. And ultimately on behalf of the institution, it's the executive director that oversees what gets done there. Now we begin to enter our world of where we are as member reps. And so, yep, you're doing a great job of getting the work groups and getting there. Notice that the link charters is highlighted and in red, and that is each one of the work groups has a responsibility to produce their charter. There's absolutely no reason on forcing that to happen before the retreat, since during the retreat we may change, we may shift, and so it's after retreat, all of those charters will need to get in here, and we can self-identify when that should happen. Work groups is what used to be committees for those of us who lived in this world in 2025 or before. They are essential because it's where the membership does the work that we've identified in our strategic plan. And we work in coordination with staff and the ED to get it done. And we implement those strategic activities about programming. Any question about the general concept of work groups? Okay, next. We're talking about the big categories before we go into gory details. So now we're talking about that steering team, which is a new invention of this year. And this steering team is basically serving as leadership for the membership. We're together 4 or more times a year, but it's through the steering team that we bring together all of the leads from the work groups, and we come together, we figure out what needs to be discussed at the next meeting and sort of look ahead of the next 2 or 3 meetings. So this collective membership guides and leads us from membership working in work groups, working with the leads to be able to do that. Forget what's been presented, not presented. We've got the membership chairs, work group leads, finance liaison, which is another position that's going to come up down below, which is liaisons with the board of directors. And we work towards the development of the annual meetings and annual retreat. And we are working on rewriting it. Natalie, I will fully fess up. This is where your name came up regularly in my mind. We're trying to remove the word annual and talk about our meetings, but you're going to hear that it's going to all add up to the right number of meetings to be discussed in the future. Any questions about the steering team? Rick.
Thank you, Maralise. So I understand how this steering team will be comprised, but I also are thinking about how some of our current work groups have co-chairs or co-leads right now. So will those work groups have to designate which one of them is going to be part of the steering team? Because a good example is legislative, right? I'm part of that work group. We have Elizabeth and Dave. So do we have to pick Elizabeth or Dave to be part of as the lead, or are we not going to have co-leads anymore for these work groups?
Absolutely co-leads. Wherever we can collaborate, co-mediate, co-facilitate, co-leads is invited and welcomed. And often amongst those of us as executive directors, we find the only way we can be a leader is if we're a co-lead. And I think that what you just chose from the legislative between Dave and Elizabeth, they do a great job. If they can, they show up together, but more often than knowing that we have the 2 of them, we always have one of them. And because they're crystal clear in their work group, they're able to represent the work group, either one of them. So it's not that formal of you must come to every single one. And then I'm going to leave the question. You don't have to answer today, Ledessa, but we did have an interesting question if you're at the steering team. But I'm first going to take the question from Colleen.
Thank you. So are there 2 chairs of the steering team? Am I understanding that correctly?
That is our proposal from a leadership standpoint, yes.
Okay,
The
thank you.
membership could choose to only, and this is an elected position, we're going to get to it in a bit.
Got
And
it. Okay.
the membership can choose to only elect one, but our proposal is a co.
Okay.
Any other questions about the steering team? All right, looking at the time, let's go take a so it's not the leg. I just want Les to know we don't have a leg. We have a legislative committee or work group. And I believe we all have a really good sense, but you'll notice these brief descriptions give us at least at a snapshot. Somebody new would know what each one of these is doing. Let's see, and the POC. So I'm leaving these here if you want to read or ask any questions. If the brief description does not match what you have in your mind, that's a kind of comment that is open, and please give it to us. This is our best guess at a brief description. Again, the question of what is marketing going to be called is also open, and those are things that we expect to have conversation at retreat about. The newest one is program innovation, and there's an idea of we have ad hoc, which we will talk about in just a minute, but program innovation is really thinking about how do we advance statewide programmatic initiatives and through the development of partnerships. It doesn't mean if it's statewide that it has to be all centers are involved, but we're looking for what are ways that we can creatively and productively offer a statewide service. And so program innovation is considering those ideas, hopefully creating some templates as we think about them, and some examples of the ones that would be in the program innovation is what we've talked about before: restorative practices, housing, might be something about civic health. If it rises to the level, this is the place where things percolate, get developed, and be able to create and be able to look at them. A question, Natalie.
Yeah, I kind of had a couple things between marketing and program innovation and ad hoc. To some of the lines, program innovation kind of seems to blur a little bit with marketing and kind of seems to blur a little bit with ad hoc. In a way, a marketing team that's in charge of messaging DRCs shouldn't necessarily be separate from a program innovation team that is advancing initiatives like that. Something about the messaging and the advancing initiatives feels like it's kind of the same work group to me. I'm not sure. And then I have a question about ad hoc. So I kind of love the idea that there's kind of one group that can be working on our little projects that aren't maybe enough for a big group, but that doesn't feel like something that like would housing RP and whoever else need to really meet with each other each month and need to elect a lead who went to the steering committee, or would they be maybe just a special projects like I this year am going to really go on housing, and if I have something to tell the steering committee, I will tell them, but I don't necessarily need to also be meeting with RP simply because we've been housed in the same mixed bag of work group. Don't know.
I think there's room for collaboration in terms of what have we learned about doing state, what are some of the best practices, and there's room for keeping it separate, Natalie. I think your comment about how do we promote from a marketing standpoint and how do we develop a program from a programmatic perspective are some of the things we're going to have to come up with the best proposal that we have, and then as we work along, we adjust. And I think it's the same kind of answer as to Rick. Let's not get hung up on the bureaucratic. It has to be one person from this, that it could be knowing that the steering committee is meeting on X date to be able to plan the September one. And I have a special project and I need the membership to look at this. You either show up or you use your representative to get to the steering group is one way to think about that. So I know it's not perfectly cooked. And in the progress, hopefully we can pick it. But if you've got a better proposal of how to distinguish there, open to it. But your question provoked two hands. So let's listen to Astrid and then Ladessa.
I'm wondering, Ladessa, if your comment is connected to that, if maybe you go first, because it's sort of.
Okay. What I think we might be confusing people, I'm just curious. So there's all committees continue functioning as you have. You keep doing your monthly meetings and doing the work you've always done. The only real change that's here is we're saying we no longer have an executive committee that's on the membership side of the line. They became the transition team. This transition team is now proposing what does some leadership amongst your membership look like? And they're basically proposing that your current steering committee add a couple of chairs who will also facilitate, or maybe you can decide on that differently. But the program innovation space doesn't mean that, because I feel like people are hearing that and thinking that these other committees are going to be under that. You only come to the program innovation space if your committee is advancing a state level effort. So an example of that is restorative practices just pulled off a very big training with OPD. OPD wants us to do more. We're not quite sure what next steps are. So that committee will keep meeting, keep working with OPD. But once they have clarity on, okay, they want ResWA to do this, you come to the innovation committee where we bring contractors and a team around the director or whoever the representative is to make sure we know what we need as Resolution Washington to do a state level program. So I don't know. Some part of what you said, Natalie, made me think you were thinking that somebody was thinking that those committees no longer existed and all got put under that. So I had another chair who thought that as well. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understands you continue to do as you have done, and the changes in, I think I said it, so I won't repeat it. Sorry.
Astrid.
I'm holding judgment, and there is a little thing that is surfacing for me right now, and it's this feels like we just went through a rebranding rather than substantially rethinking how we're working together. And I don't feel there yet. Maybe that will change by the end. Um, and so I guess what's coming up for me right now is thinking, what do I must have happened through Resolution Washington? And to me, that's standards, relationships as it relates to stakeholders, and advocacy. Those are the three, and there's different things that have different work groups that have a piece of that ball, but those are the kind of the things that must happen at this level. That we like each other and we hang out with each other, that's a byproduct. And a lot of that happens when you're trying to develop standards for what you're doing together. But I kind of, and I'm not saying that this is absolutely right. This was just kind of in a moment that I was like, these three things. But I'm kind of, I guess I'm sitting with that because I'm like, I wonder if we feels like we need a deeper reorientation and maybe like deeper challenge so that we don't feel too, I feel like we're staying too close to the familiar and how we've done things and not challenging ourselves enough to like think rather than in like this has been the thing that you've done and we don't want you to feel a loss. Reorientation of like these are the things that we must do and like how do we organize around that? So I'm willing to have my mind changed to by the end of it, but I
Let me
did want
check.
to bring
Let me
this
check
up.
with you in terms of understanding your message. When I hear you say as a member rep, I really come to ResWA and I need support, help, and conversation about standards. I need help developing, maintaining, and supporting relationships. And I see the advocacy as those are three things. Are you thinking about our work groups and that should be the content of the work groups? Or are you questioning the board of directors and the other position? Was it really in the work group conversation? Because if that's where it is, I think your three essential pieces are really what needs to be in people's minds as we come to retreat, because we're not assuming after retreat we will have these named committees. All of us have the power when we show up and we do the strategic planning and we look at the strengths and opportunities on day 2. Do we need to meld some together, as Natalie said? Do we need to separate? Do we actually have to name those three functions and figure out what they are? So is it your comment about the actual work groups or about the structure that goes from the board to the steering?
I'm a little less concerned with the board because I also feel like that's their territory
Okay.
and they should have a right to organize their work in the way that they feel suits them. But definitely, I want to be mindful of our effort. And by the way, when I said relationship, I don't mean like helping me. I mean, yeah, there might be some local relationships that you help me, that somebody mentors me around, but I'm talking about the big relationships that we need as an association to move the needle to where we need to move it, because
I'm with you.
that's what we do together.
Yeah. So let us take a look at the last 2 boxes, because then you've been holding back on judgment and holding back. We only have 2 more boxes to go through, or 3 more. But we have gone to the go to the steering chairs. So I want to offer that the transition team has sat with no elected leadership, and only work group leads. And it took a bit to sort of absorb that and think about that. And when we came back, we thought, at least for the year or two as a transition, we needed some elected member rep leadership to guide the process. So I really want to offer that as the transition team, we almost showed up with no chairs and just did it, but we have come down to the proposal is that the chair role of the steering chair would facilitate the statewide meetings, including the retreat, would liaison with the executive director, and would be an elected position in June, and they would be staggering. So you'd always have one new facilitator chair who's going to be the facilitator, and one who's just entering, and one who's been there for a year. So this is a way to stagger and share the responsibilities. But the feeling that there needs to be someone who is an elected leadership role who ultimately is holding the threads to be able to hold these meetings during the year. So that is the proposed right now. And based on that proposal, based on it will probably be less work than what Moonwater and I have experienced the last 2 or 3 years, but it still is a heavy lift. And facilitating this group of people is not easy. We all have our own ideas. We're proposing that there be a stipend for the co-chairs and reserve some of the funds for facilitation as needed. And so that might be that we might all, as a steering whatever we are, a steering team, may say, we actually need an outside facilitator that guides us through this tough conversation. And that money would be put aside to be able to do that. I think it's 21,000, giving something to the co-chairs and then keeping it as a reserve. And I'm just going to go through the next three relatively quickly. We've all talked about, we know what a committee chair is, and so we're just renaming that. A work group lead is facilitating the monthly work group meetings, implementing and monitoring the strategic plan, and brings the work group perspective to plan and deliver in every one of the membership meetings, starting in the steering and the membership. And then we have defined the finance liaison as a member rep who would be the person who would be the member liaison to the board finance committee. So this is really somebody who is elected on our behalf and that would then be at the board level of the finance committee, giving the member perspective from a finance perspective. And then we all know that we have a fiscal agent. We worked really hard in defining what this was. And then I think 3 meetings ago, we all agreed it did not make sense to put the fiscal agent on our organizational chart, given the motivation of what we're doing and the separating of conflict of interest over fiduciary things. And that was, that position was removed. Below, we have some scenarios about how that communication would go, but I really think we should stop right here. We started to have a rich conversation about it. I'm going to ask you to drop well, Astrid, do you need the visual to be able to talk to your concerns?
No, but
Yeah.
I
So I'm
have
going to
it.
suggest we drop it. We all have a copy in front of us. Are there any questions about the description of the positions and the roles? Any sort of big questions, doubts, suggestions for changes? And I got this big
Is the finance liaison expected to be a transitional figure, or are we thinking that's going to be a mainstay?
I think we're all interested and curious about what that actually would look like. So there's been a huge shift from treasurer who actually did our books to now we have someone else doing the books. What is that role and what would it look like? So depends on who you ask if that's a mainstay. And what I'm going to offer is we are the transition team offering you a transition. I don't know if any of this is going to stick. I hear the bops pops, but now I see you, Colleen, and then you, Astrid.
Well, excuse me. Will staff start taking notes at meetings?
Yes. So we've removed the recording chair And they have been taking lots of meeting notes and actions, and responsibility in the midst of the meeting to ask questions. Have you got what you need? And they're doing that transparent note taking. Astrid?
If I find my thing, too many windows. What is the difference between that liaison role and the finance role up in the board of directors?
The tie is the finance liaison is a member rep, and the finance committee lives at the board. And so we're creating a direct line in that specific lane.
Okay, and why?
Their responsibilities.
I mean, sure, but so does the board of director have that responsibility. So I'm kind of wondering, why did we need to create that at this level? That should live here, I think. I mean, if you have somebody doing books, right?
Yep, there's
And
professional
then you
bookkeeper
have
and
your
accountant.
board that's got the fiduciary responsibility. What is this role adding to this process that we need?
Let's check in with our member rep who also happens to be on the board of directors. Leslie.
It is the board's responsibility to decide what committees they want to have, and a board member must be on each committee if it is a board committee. And so the three committees that you have suggested here are certainly possible, but I think I agree with Astrid that it really is the board's job to determine what information they need and where they want to get it. And currently, Gayle has been providing all of these documents to the board each month, and the board has been reviewing them each month individually, and Ledessa has brought them to the board as well. So we talk, we ask questions, and then the finance committee has Matt, who is the treasurer, has been meeting with Gayle and with Mary, and I'm not sure who else. So it just seems to me like the board needs to be the ones deciding who is on their committee, and I'm not sure that I understand what the relationship to the liaison is. What is the necessity of a specific liaison?
Do you believe it was a board request? Can we keep that connection for a while? Do you think that it originated there, Leslie, by any chance? Would you know?
Well, it might have originated there, not in a board meeting, but with Matt through the committee, and we hadn't discussed that necessarily.
So I think it's a really good question, and ERA is holding on to those kinds of questions. So I think that's a really good question, Astrid.
Well, what I'm also hearing as I'm hearing Leslie talk is I am wondering if there is an internal capacity to support the financial reporting necessary for that. So it doesn't sound like that we're not contracting a bookkeeper. I mean, somebody has to keep the books. And so essentially we're relying on a volunteer within our members. No, we're not doing that.
What I would suggest is we are in transition. So onboarding a new bookkeeper, onboarding a new software, as far as and I'm not involved in it, but we are in the midst of a transition to professional bookkeeping. I'm not sure that transition has happened 100%. And as someone who is fighting with QuickBooks myself personally, I know that Gayle has been fighting the fight with QuickBooks to do the transition that they needed. So that's as much as I have for you.
Yeah, and I think that's why I had the question of whether that was a transitional, in the way that you offered that the co-chairs was a transitional position versus something that we are, we don't know what's going to stick, but at the same time, there's a sense of this might be something that we need for a couple years.
Yeah. Ladessa, beyond nodding your head, it's going to fall off if you nod any harder.
I would just say this, yes, Astrid, I think for me, like in this moment of the transition happening, this kind of goes back to that transparency piece where this will be the first time an external group will be doing the work for us. And so I was taking great comfort in having both Gayle and Megan, who are seeing all the things flow and have done all the flowing for us all to have one space to look at it together and just and gain some confidence. And it could be something that we sunset down the road and don't need. And it was just more for maybe my comfort.
Leslie.
So I think the important thing is, who does the board ask questions to if they have a misunderstanding? And I think they ask the questions of the treasurer, who has chaired the finance committee. And the treasurer should have all of the answers. And if the treasurer doesn't have answers, and the finance committee doesn't have answers, then they get those answers from the bookkeeper, from the bookkeeping organization that is working for us.
So we had a couple questions about the chairs as we were going through. I'm not sure if we got all those questions. Questions about the finance liaison. I felt like there was a bigger picture question you have, Astrid, and I'm looking at the time to make sure there's the space for your question.
I think I've already surfaced it, and I hope that folks understand that this question is connected to my earlier question, if it wasn't clear. I am hoping that we challenge ourselves enough in how we're working through this and not just go through a process of renaming the things that we do because for the sake of change. If we're not really going to change substantially the way that we're operating, leave things the way they are. But I actually don't think that that's what we're interested. I think that and I understand that there's a lot of people that put a lot of work to do this, and it's really hard because we don't want to devalue each other's work. And so maybe if we're, rather than talking about individual things, getting clarity on like, these are the things that we need to do, whatever they are. Maybe that can help us work through that in a way that doesn't make any particular group feel like their work is being diminished.
And some of the hardest work, the hardest thinking that happens is, how do you go from what has been, and I'm familiar with, to what essentially do I really need? And then how do I build from that need? And so I just want to model and support us all in asking the question, what is the essence of what I as a director and my center need from this association? And you posed it that way, Astrid. I really look to Resolution Washington in three big areas that have to do with, I can deal with my world, but this is the statewide and broadening it. And you offered those three. And I invite every single one of us to think that level of, what am I really looking for? Because it's out of that essence and the need that the new and the way to be able to approach it. And the other piece that I guess I want to offer is, because I've always done the things the way I've always done them, if you tell me you want to do them a different way, somehow I feel like you're dissing me. And to improve or to change or to do it differently. And we kind of all have to release that. Just because that's the way we've always done it, let's let go of that and embrace the new ways of doing things. And that's the kind of mindset that we need to show up with and be willing to say, my work group has been so fantastic over the last 10 years, it's time for it to change. And we don't have a lot of time for those discussions. So do a lot of thinking before you show up at retreat, because those 2.5 days that we have set aside are so packed. And we all want the gracious space to think, which is what we're trying to measure. So with that, what do you need to do your best thinking about this structural proposal, communication flow, and decision process? Leslie?
I think it's important for us all to to just focus on the authority and workflow. That's what we're trying to put into a chart and a narrative here. So what's the authority and workflow? It isn't about the work itself. It isn't about at this point what we need. That comes after we've said, okay, this is how our workflow is going to go for the next year, and let's see how this works. But the work that we're doing, or this is how our communications are going to flow. But the work that we're doing it can be as dynamic as we want it to be. And that's where the importance lies. We just need to get our structure down so that we can talk about it if we need to talk about it out and about.
Any other curious question? Any other, I have no idea what you guys are talking about questions? Any other brilliant ways of how to do it differently? Thoughts? And anything that we didn't cover? Rick.
Just so that I'm trying to make this all connect in my brain appropriately. The steering team is really there as the voice between the membership to the board of directors. Is that what I'm hearing? And that through that they are to collaborate with the executive director and then talk, and then that's part of that hierarchy of the executive director talking to the board of directors after whatever's come up from the steering team from the membership is from like a quarterly meeting or something like that. Is that correct?
Can I tweak it a little bit?
By all means, please.
Okay. So we are 20 centers. That's 20 amazing organizations of both staff and board of directors. We show up as membership in a room, and we are the decision makers about all the programmatic work of Resolution Washington. To get our wonderful strategy taken care of, to do the work, we break ourselves into work groups. And those work groups are led by leads. But to be able to pull off every time we come together as a membership to have a meeting, we come together to be able to say, all right, how do we get this work done? And so it's the collective leadership, which is making sure all of the members are happy and all of the work groups are getting what they need. And we're pulling off collectively each one of those meetings in a way that connects with the next and the next and the next. So really the steering team, which I see that there's a proposal cord, they're receiving from below and they're sending it back out saying, we have heard, we have worked together, and this is the plan and this is what it is. The executive director then hears all of that, and if there's a need from a governance or something, that is able to elevate it to the board. But I wouldn't say the steering committee's very function is to communicate to the board. It's to help all of us with this collective leadership stuff that we've chosen to do. Did that help?
It does, but the other thing that the direction that the membership wants to go from each of our work groups, but as a collective, this is the path that we would like to move forward. That has to be presented to the board of directors, and the board of directors have to adopt that as well, right? Because our strategic plan that we're talking about, the board of directors has to adopt that as what the strategic plan is for Resolution Washington moving forward. So there still has to be something, there's that mechanism that goes between what the members are asking and for consideration, and that for the board to actually ultimately decide upon yes or no.
So that comes from the membership at the end of retreat. We finished the retreat with 2, which is why there's such pressure to get it, think broadly, think creatively, and get it done. Of here's the strategic plan of what we want to do this year. This is our bigger picture of where we want to go. And this is the next year's budget. And this is our proposal. So when that finishes on June 4th, the board of directors meets on June 5th to hear, and I believe there's one member of the board that's going to be with us physically and one that's going to be online, is then they make their vote the day after and get back to us, because we all have to start our budget year on July 1 and ResWA has July 1. So it's the membership who proposes to the board, we recommend this strategic plan and we recommend this budget to fund that strategic plan. It's not the steering team. That's the retreat consensus and then hand it off. Coordination team, steering committee. The steering is giving the, the where are we going? Oops, we thought we were going to go there, but we got to readjust. Any other questions? And look at that. You don't have time for more questions. It's 4:59 and it's going to be 5 o'clock and we're nice to each other. I appreciate the questions, the doubts, the curiosity, and the holding judgment, but still challenging. And that is the challenge we all face at the retreat. And we'll see you there on June 1 or 2 or 3 or wherever you're showing up.
Thanks, everyone. And you should have the retreat agenda in your inbox. We just hit send shortly before this meeting. We'll see you next week at CPEC.
Jessica, you are empowered to stop recording.